Mishnayot Yomi for Shabbat Vayigash. We are beginning the 15th parak in Shabbat at Mishnah Aleph. Elu Kisharim. These are the knots. Shehayavin Alehem. That one is liable to bring a korban if they tied such a knot, meaning it's a Aser Deraisa knot. What are they? Kesher Hagamolin, the knot of the camel driver. Now, what they would do was the camel would be tied through the nose. They would put a piece of rope through its nose and then make a permanent knot in the end of this loop to make a permanent loop there that they then use to attach the camel to other things or lead their camel. V'keshra saponin, and the knot of the sailors. This is similarly, it goes in the front of the ship. They would make a permanent loop with a permanent professional-style knot there, and use that to attach ropes to the ship, or attach ships to one another, as we saw earlier in Shabbat about carrying from one ship to another. Ukishemshu chayiv al kishuran, and just like one is liable to bring a korban for tying such a knot on the Sabbath, kachu chayiv al heteran, so too he would be liable for untying such a knot on the Sabbath. Now, before we go on, the Bartanura brings an explanation based on the Gemara. There are other explanations. You can see the Kehate, you can see Rashi in the Gemara about really what kind of knots are deraisa, chiyuv, permanent knots. Now, according to the Bartanura, a permanent and professional knot, so a knot made to stay there permanently and tied in a professional way or by a professional who knows what they're doing, it's a unique craftsman kind of knot, that would be chayiv deraita. However, if it's merely a professional knot, or it's a craftsman-style knot, but it's not professional, it's not lasting, then according to the Bartanura, it's pater aval aser. So it's rabbinically forbidden, but it's not chayiv. And a knot that is not permanent and not skillful, not a craftsman, professional-style knot, would actually be mutter, according to the Bartanura. You see the Kahati, you see the other Mefarshim there, and consult your local Orthodox rabbi for tying knots on Shabbos. Here the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol kesher, any knot, shu yachol lehatir be'achad miyadav, that you could untie with one hand. You can single-handedly untie this knot. Ein chayavin alav. One would not be liable for untying this. It's not permanent enough. Halacha is not like Rabbi Meir, says the Bartanura. The Mishnah base. Yesh l'chol kesharim. It says we do have knots, she'ein chayavin alehem, that you're not chayav to bring a korban. They're not deraita knot. Kikesher gamolim, kikesher saponim. But they are similar to the knots that are used by the camel drivers in their camel nose and the knots used by the sailors on their boats. So here the Bartanura explains, because the Mishnah doesn't tell us, but the Gemara does tell us that what these are knots that they would use for loops to attach your camel. So you'd tie a new knot, a new rope, into the pre-existing permanent loop in the camel's nose, or the bow of the ship, and use that to tie your ships together, or tie your camel to the trough, or whatever it is. But it's a knot that's it's made to last a while, but it's not permanent. So these are not aser deraisa, but rabbinically, because they resemble the other professional knots, they are forbidden on a rabbinical level. Now the Mishnah continues, kosheret isha, a woman may tie, so lichatchila, you can go ahead, no problem with this, the mafteach chaluka, the strap that opens her jumper. So it's like a shirt that is tied up on the shoulders. So both shoulders are tied, and she's tying like obviously it's a temporary knot because she's going to change her clothing. V'chute svacha, and the strings of her svacha, that's the famous hairnet that we've discussed earlier about wearing b'meisha. You said we talked about that. We talked about washing that also. V'shel pesikya, and also her belt. It's kind of like an apron kind of belt that they would tie, and obviously not permanently. Ritzut, minol, v'sandal, and the straps of the shoe or the sandals. So Baruch Hashem, you can tie your shoes on Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, these are meant to be untied each day, or when you come home, you untie your shoes. It's good. And not only those may be tied, the Mishnah adds v'nodot, yain v'shemen, and bags, flasks that they use to carry wine and oil. So even though these often had two spouts, two openings, you tie both of them closed. Even though you can only need to untie one of them to access the contents, it's still considered a temporary knot. Kedei shel basar, and a pot of meat. Now this is even though it has a spigot or a spout, you could pour out the broth. You could tie a cover onto the lid. Basically, you're making a lid by tying something onto the top like a cloth, tying the cloth onto the top of this pot. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, koshrin lifnei behema. He says you can tie a knot in front of a behema. So what's going on is you have your animal inside the fence, inside the pen or the vivarium, and you don't have a gate, so you can't close the gate, so you just tie a rope in front of there, and the animal probably will stay inside, bishvil shelo tetzeh, so that it won't go out. So this is a temporary knot as well. Koshrin deli bif sikya, and you can tie a bucket. So what's going on is you're tying the bucket to the opening of the well, so the bucket doesn't get stuck at the bottom of the well. You can tie it with this psikya is like a belt, or like his gartel, of all over chevel, but not with a rope. So now the reasoning here is if you tie it with a rope, you're just going to leave the rope there. The rope is going to be buttled, it's going to be permanent, and you've tied a permanent knot for the bucket, and that's usser. But with your belt or your gartel, Rabbi say no one's going to leave their gartel there. They're going to use it temporarily so they don't lose the bucket. Then they got to untie their gartel or the belt so they can use it and wear it. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda allows using a rope. The Barnura here brings that the Gemara explains not just any old rope. If it's any old rope, he agrees it's usser. And he disagrees when it's a weaver's rope that they actually use in the process of weaving to move the strings around. Klalama Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda adds a general rule. Kol kesher, any knot, she'enu shel kayama, that is not meant to last, ein chayavin al lov. One is not chayav on a deraisa, on a biblical level, to bring a carbon for tying such a knot. As we mentioned in the first Mishnah, it appears that the sages actually added another qualification that it has some sort of craftsmanship or professionalism to it as well. Yashar kochachem rabotai, Shabbat shalom.